crinoid on the outside, a madman lurking inside. Not a happy situation. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Seeds of Doom, not to be confused with the Seeds of Death, which is a second Doctor adventure. This is written by Robert Banks Stewart, who also wrote Terror of the Zygons, and is directed by Douglas Camfield in his last Doctor Who story. So yeah, pretty big point in the Doctor Who mythos. This is a 6-part adventure, and this will start a trend where the seasons would be 4-4-4-parters, and then the finale would be a 6-parter. This is the finale to season 13, which I probably have stated before is my favourite season of Doctor Who, period. I love every single story. So you know what I'm going to say about this story. It's just a fantastically written epic. Now, a lot of people state that this story is inspired by The Thing, especially the 1950s film version, as the Dave Cameron one, John Cameron. I can't remember who directed the 80s version, but the movie, the 80s one wasn't released yet. And that's true for the first 2 episodes, as it is set in the Antarctica, and we follow a small group of people in a science facility, and there's this creature made out of plant that is basically got a body count, killing people one by one. However, that's only 2 episodes. From episode 3 onwards, the story is mainly set in a very nice, sunny London, or at least in England. So yeah, and it has more in line with the film Day of the Triffids. So that's a lot of horror elements that was inspired by the story. In fact, Robert Banks Stewart actually got into trouble as it was thought that his story was actually a rip-off of Day of the Triffids. But he explained that it was never actually inspired by it. It's just the 2 stories were both inspired by the same elements, the same sort of like plant creature things. So that's pretty interesting. So yeah, it's basically The Thing meets Day of the Triffids. I also like as well, it's basically, if you look at this story from a distance, you could say it's a base under siege story. However, the base keeps changing. So I like that, because in the first 2 episodes, the base is in Antarctica, and you've got this creature, the crinoid, that's slowly picking off our cast one by one. And then when you go into London, the Doctor and Sarah investigate the house of Mr. Chase. And yeah, so, and when they're there, there's loads of plants coming attacking them, and you got Chase himself being an absolute madman and sending his henchmen after him. One of them is played by, oh my god, I can't remember his name. One of them is actually played by John Callis. Trigger from Only Fools and Horses. So that's really, that's a really cool cast note, and he gets a lot of screen time. In fact, the story kind of treats him as a reluctant companion for the majority of the story. He starts off like a villain, but then when he realises how mad Chase is, he starts actually helping the Doctor, even if it's for his own gain. And I would really like to have seen a companion like this, who goes for the quickest route first, and only really cares about themselves. It makes great banter, and there's some scenes where he's basically just chucking the doctor in some bins, and he tells him to get up, and he manhandles him and pushes him down, putting the doctor in a very serious situation. Speaking of the Doctor, this is probably Tom Baker at his most iconic, as you get some really iconic lines. How do you do? Have you met Miss Smith? She's my best friend. But it also shows what his Doctor represents quite easily. When he's faced with the Crinoids, and when he's facing with basically people he's allied with, but they're being a little bit reluctant to work with him, he takes the matter extremely seriously, and to the point where others may laugh at him because of how serious he's taken it. However, when he's put in a serious situation, but it's not overpowered him yet, like with Mr. Chase being quite mad, and he is easily can kill the Doctor at any point. The Doctor takes it really lightly, including there's a scene where Chase basically says that he's going to kill the Doctor and Sarah no matter what they say, and Sarah's like, why do you have to kill us? We haven't done anything. And the Doctor's like, oh, come on, Sarah, be reasonable. He can't let us go. We might tell others about his exploits here. Yeah, he's being like surprisingly cheerful and thing with Mr. Chase and stuff, which really emphasises what makes the Fourth Doctor so great. It has some of his best moments in the entire series, and I don't think his performance will be topped until the City of Death way later on, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, so I'm not going to really talk about like the story too much because it is 6 parts long. I'm just going to talk about elements that I can think of. There's a scene in here which a lot of people misinterpret because it's shown in a lot of clips, like the best of Doctor Who clips or compilations, in which the Fourth Doctor twists someone's neck. It's actually Scobie, John Callis's character, and a lot of people take it that the Doctor literally killed this guy. However, if you watch the story, it's clearly that he didn't. This happens in part 3 or part 4, I believe, and he survives until the very end when he dies. Let's talk about the Crinoid. A very interesting alien race. You can't really communicate with it. It just wants to eat and feed off human flesh. And the stated that the Doctor has met them before, although we haven't seen that adventure. I really like that they've done that, which is really surprising because a lot of people make the fuss that the Third Doctor has said he's met Sontarans before. But when the Fourth Doctor says he's met the Crinoids before, nobody has batted an eyelid. There hasn't been any extended canon, as far as I'm aware of, that deals with a previous Doctor fighting the Crinoids. Because it can't have been the Fourth Doctor, because Sarah Jane doesn't know who they are, and at this point the Doctor's only travelled with Sarah Jane in his fourth body. So what happens is they find a pod, they explain, in the frozen ice in Antarctica, and when it's exposed to heat, it grows and grows and grows, and then it bursts out, and this thing grabs onto people's arms and slowly turns them into a crinoid, a giant plant creature. There's a bit of similarities with Alien here, I personally find. You have these egg-shaped things that open up in the same way, and things come out and they attach themselves to a human host, with the alien growing inside of them. Only in here they don't spit out of their chest. They actually mutate into the creature. which is, again, Alien came out in 1979, so maybe some more inspiration for Alien? Who knows? And I really like how, with this monster, you see different forms of it. We see it take over a human, and you get the human face just barely with the lips and the eyes, and then you've got all this like green vegetation stuff. And it's a very horrifying thought. There's a great scene in which the doctor explains that they have to amputate the guy's arm just in case it slows maybe it could slow the infection. And the only one qualified to do it, or at least the most qualified to do it, has never done it before, and he's worried and he's petrified. And basically Sarah Jane has to convince this character that he can do it. A very great scene. And then the crinoid gets up and he transforms into a sort of just a blobby plant creature, which is actually an axon from the claws of axons, just painted green. So that's why it looks familiar. I personally think it looks a lot better here. I think the green and the fact that it's a plant, it's supposed to be this muddy, dirty, non-hygienic thing. I think it looks better here. And then they kill that one off, and then later on in the story another person turns into, so he starts into a crinoid. And then he just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until he's basically bigger than the house that they're in. And you get some really great miniature effects, even if it's a very small period of it. It's nice to see that at the start of the season we had the Loch Ness Monster with some really great giant effects, and we're ending the season with a great giant monster effect. I personally prefer the Loch Ness Monster, but this one's pretty good too, and it reminds me a lot of a lot of Japanese kaiju movies. But yeah, it's a very horrifying experience in the story. Whilst this is going on, we've got Mr. Chase. Now, Mr. Chase is a very strange and unusual character. The more I watch this story, the more he just makes me laugh. Which might be a very surprising reaction for people who've seen it, that thing, because he's not a comedy character. He doesn't do anything particularly humorous or silly. But let me just delve in. So the first time we see him, he's learning about the pod in Antarctica, and we know that he's kind of a plant enthusiast, as he explains that to his colleague that they will save whale, they will save endangered species of animals, but the most vulnerable plants don't get any of their protection. And he explains that he wants the pod because it's unique. So that's why he sends Scarby and another character into the Antarctic. And then he comes into the more focus in the story when the Doctor realises what's happened and comes back to England. And slowly you see his obsession get more and more. He puts human lives at risk. He willingly feeds the crinoid and nurtures it to health. And just the way he speaks, when he's got the Doctor and Sarah prisoner, he is a A-class James Bond villain. He gives a detour of his house and how his plants work. He even makes music for the plants. I don't know why, but that always makes me laugh. That this guy, he basically treats them as if they're living things. And there's this really weird scene in which he says, people say that you should talk to plants. I believe that. What the hell is he talking about? Who's saying that you should talk to plants? What is this guy on? What? But the guy who plays him takes it extremely seriously, and he does a fantastic job. This season has some of the best acting in the entire series of Doctor Who. My favourite being, in terms of pure acting, the brain of Morbius. But this one is a very good, great one as well. We got, so Chase then doesn't really care about human life. He wants to see the plant grow, and slowly he starts to reason that this thing can take over the world. And when somebody tells him about it, he doesn't even flinch. He's like, so we are just vermin on this planet. We deserve to die. Let the plants grow. Now, excuse me, I'm going to take some photos. And even though they've been attacked on all fronts, and this is a base under siege situation, he just goes outside and takes photos of the crinoid. And then they've got this weird scene in which he's like, no, I'm a friend. And you think, right, he's had it. That's his storyline, is that he got too greedy and then the crinoids basically killed him for it. But then the next time you see him, he's just lying on the floor, not dead, not even harmed, just lying on the floor, and he's talking to himself, and he says, yes, I will obey, I will, and I must. And then the next time you see him, he's meditating, talking to his plants, as if he was one of them. He even says, my friends, talk to me, my friends, listen to me, my friends. Oh, and it just crackles me up how into the role this guy is. I mean, it's such a really ridiculous concept, but the fact that they got such a great actor to play this character is just way too funny to comprehend. And he even starts believing he is a plant. When Sarah asks him about, you think that we should die? And he's like, yes, all animal life shall perish beneath our feet and stuff like that. And it just cracks me up. It just literally makes me laugh all the time. And how the majority of the cast take him so seriously, like his henchman and his butler. They mentioned, his butler mentions at one point he's not acting like himself, he's feeling a bit ill, right at the very end, in part 6. In fact, in part 6, he actually goes on a killing spree, which reminds me a lot of a slasher movie. One by one, he's picking off our group of heroes stuck in the house and feeding them into a machine which will act as compost for his plants. Yes, that's how dedicated this guy is. He kills people and makes it compost. Come on, why is that not funny? And he almost gets the doctor, however, Sarah Jane saves the doctor at the last minute. And Chase, he goes into the compost machine to try and keep the doctor there. And the doctor escapes and tries to help him, but he keeps pushing him in. And he then dies. He gets killed in his compost machine. Really funny, really ironic. I love this character. I wish maybe we should have the ghost of Chase. That would have been a story I'd like to see. That would be really funny. Let's get that. Something I didn't speak about as well is that this story is the last major appearance for a long time to feature UNIT. Though none of the UNIT regulars appear. There's no Brigadier, no Benton, no Yates. Sarah Jane doesn't count, I don't think. And I personally don't consider it a UNIT story. UNIT only start appearing in episode 5, and they don't appear as an organisation until episode 6. So I don't consider it, but a few people consider this the final, or at least the swan song to the unit era. But I personally don't consider it the unit story personally. There's a reference to the brigadier in that he's in Geneva, which I believe is the first time they say he's in Geneva. This will be a recurring thing in which they keep mentioning that the brigadier's in Geneva. And in part 6, when the crinoid is the size of a human, they shoot it down with lasers, which has no effect. And the Doctor explains, right, there's only one way to stop it. Send bombs from ships and just basically just send missiles at it constantly. And they're like, what about you and Sarah? You're in the house. And the Doctor's like, don't mind about us. If we are not out, just shoot either way. So it becomes the tensions in episode 6 becomes very high as you've got characters on the inside wanting to kill the Doctor. On the outside, you've got this giant plant, and now you've got a running clock as you've got these aircrafts shooting missiles at the crinoid. However, when Chase is killed, the Doctor and Sarah can run in for their lives through trees as the crinoid later gains the power to control other plants, which really comes out of nowhere. Like, the Doctor doesn't explain until literally moments before it happens. The crinoids have this ability. But it's really cool, I guess, and it makes you feel more like they could take over the world, especially how life on Earth is mainly just plants anyway. And yeah, you get this big epic battle then of missiles shooting at the crinoid, and you get a fun little scene at the end where the Doctor and Sarah Jane go in the TARDIS and they land out back in Antarctica, and you get a really iconic line in which they're like, have we just arrived, or are we yet to come? And they say yet to come at the same time. And that's the Seeds of Doom, and the conclusion to season 13, my favourite season of Doctor Who. So overall, this story is a gem. I don't recommend it to everyone though, however. For starters, it's 6 parts long, so that might be a hurdle. And another thing to note as well is that, as I mentioned before, Chase acts like a pure James Bond villain, and which is great. But James Bond villains are known for hitting some cliches. For one, talking too much, and B, leaving the room just before the characters are dying, just to be on the safe side, letting himself believe that the heroes are dead when in fact they're around. And Chase falls under those categories, under those cliches. But if you can get past those, it is a very, very good story. It both is claustrophobic and horrifying, but also there's a lot of bright scenery, the white snow, and the majority of the story is set in daytime London. And yeah, it's just a great piece of writing. So that's the Seeds of Doom. So join me next time where we go back and wonder what's happening with River Song. And again, I haven't seen the story, so join me next time for The King of Infinite Space. See you then on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra.